News Radio 1580 WCCF. This is Charlotte County Speaks. How you doing? I'm Ken Lovejoy. It's 10:07. Thanks for tuning in on this Thursday morning. Our phone lines are open at 941-206-1580. Toll free 888-441-1580. You can email us. The address is ccspeaks@live.com. Check out our Charlotte County Speaks Facebook page and listen to us streaming live on the web at WCCFAM.com. I'd like to welcome to the studio Scott Weinberg. Scott.
Hello.
How
Nice
you
to see you
doing?
again. I'm doing fine, thanks.
It's been
Ken.
a while since you've been here.
Yes, sir, it has, but I always love appearing on your show.
Wish it could be under better circumstances, because this whole situation is...
Well, it's a pisser. I gotta tell you, it's a real pisser.
That's for sure. We didn't really expect all this national attention based on this story, but I'm glad it's out there, and I'm glad people are paying attention to this.
And, truth be told, well, first of all, you brought a friend with you, too.
Yes,
Who's
also,
guy?
this
Who's
is my...
guy? Oh, he didn't want to be introduced. Well, that's too bad. We're going to introduce you. Who are you?
Blake Mevis. I'm an associate with
Oh,
State Farm.
okay. Excellent. All right. I love cops. My whole family's cops. Raised with cops. Know a lot of cops. Love cops. But I don't like bad cops. I don't like cops that give departments a bad name. And unfortunately, we got one here, regardless of who's sticking up for him. You watch this video, and I don't care who you are. If you watch that video, that Punta Gorda police officer was abusing that particular suspect, who was being a douche. I mean, yeah, he was acting like a douche. But again, as a professional police officer, you're trained to handle situations like that where you do not abuse the suspect. You get them under control. You do what you got to do.
And I agree with you, Ken. I mean, the situation here is we're a criminal defense firm, but we don't hate cops. We like cops. We represent cops. We represent cops' families. There's lots of good cops in this town. This officer is a problem. And frankly, this officer has been a problem since he got to Punta Gorda. I knew that there was a problem with him even a year before this video ever came out. I contacted all the defense attorneys in our area, and I told them this officer is over-aggressive. He's making bad stops. He's making bad searches. He's tailgating people. He's pulling people over for illegal tints when they don't have illegal tints. And I said, watch out for this guy. He's being very aggressive. Now, my job is to protect my clients. My job isn't to change the world. So when I get a case with this officer, I show the state attorney what a aggressive officer he was being. The state attorney dismisses the case, and we don't file a complaint because it's not good to file complaints against police officers because it doesn't help you if you're in a small town such as Punta Gorda. Eventually, this case came to my attention from somebody who works at the government, sent me this client. We got the case. We signed it up. We didn't really think it was going to be much until we got the video. Once we saw the video, we knew that we had something really, really horrific here. What that officer did to my client is inexcusable. There was no reason to ever send the dog on my client. There was no reason to let that dog eat my client for that long. It was just terrible from start to finish.
And when we say eat the client, we mean eat the client.
Literally ate part of my client's lat muscle. It is gone. There was nothing to sew up. It has disappeared. It was digested by the dog.
And again, if you haven't seen the video, folks, this actually took place October 30th. There was a story in the Sun about it last week, or earlier this week, rather.
Correct.
And again, if you're being pulled over for not having lights on your bicycle at night, to have it escalate to the level that it did.
Well,
and
I think the biggest problem, and you know, in the law we always look at intent. What was the officer's intent? If you watch the video, the first thing the officer says to my client while he's at the gas station, riding his bike past him, within about 2 seconds of turning on his lights, stop or I'll send the dog. That's the first thing he says to my client. Now, this is before my client allegedly fled or went anywhere. I mean, he's literally just in the parking lot. Stop or I'll send the dog. That officer that night wanted to get his canine to bite somebody, and he found a perfect excuse to do it.
Well, if that's the intent, maybe you can prove that. All I'm looking at is the video, and when I see the handler, what's his cop's name again, Cole, allowing the dog to bite into that guy, tug at him, keep tugging at him when he was obviously already being submissive. I don't see how you can justify keeping an officer like that on the force.
And frankly, that's our question. I mean, we want this officer fired. He needs to be fired. In fact, Fox News just did a report yesterday indicating that this officer had 2 prior excessive use of force complaints against him when he was at the Miramar Police Department. That police department decided not to hire him after his probationary period based on those 2 incidents. And Punta Gorda was aware when the prior chief hired this man that this guy had 2 prior incidents in an 18-month span over on the East Coast, and they still hired him, and now he's doing the same thing in our town, and they're not getting rid of him, and that's a problem. Just because you work for the government doesn't mean you shouldn't be allowed to be fired. Having a job in a position of power like the police, you need to have the right temperament, you need to have the right people. I respect the chief for trying to protect his people, but enough is enough. This man is dangerous, he's on the street, and he's got that dog with him, and it's going to happen again. It will.
And again, I find it kind of strange that, at least the way that the article was written, Officer Cole doesn't get suspended, the dog gets suspended.
Right, and they also changed their policy based on the bite. I mean, the chief even admitted the officer had poor decision making on that night. Well, frankly, if you or myself make a poor decision with a weapon, we go to prison or we get shot. Mm-hmm. This officer gets a little bit of training, and he's back on the streets with the dog doing the same thing. And frankly, this officer was trained by the Northport Canine Division. Now, the same canine division that's being sued and under investigation by the FBI based on their bites with their canine dog.
Look, all I'm saying is there, in no way, shape, or form should the dog even have been used, in my opinion, based on this. If this cop wasn't able to handle this guy on the bicycle, then he needs to find another profession. And if this is the type of situation where he thinks that excessive force with that canine is warranted, again, you need to find a new canine cop. The guy needs to go.
I totally agree with you. He does need to go. And, you know, this isn't the only incident with this officer. This is just the first one that shocks the conscience when you look at the video. There's multiple other videos of this officer being overly aggressive. Nothing that would blow up on YouTube or anything like that. But you got to think that people don't make complaints against police officers. Their lawyers tell them not to. I tell my clients not to, because when you get the case dismissed, you go away and you try to melt back into the night. That officer had 2 complaints over on the East Coast, which means he must have had a lot more people wanting to complain about him, but had lawyers that told him not to. I have multiple clients that could have filed complaints against him, but I told them not to, because my job is to help my client, not to, change the world. But now we got this video, and it's just too much. Somebody should do something. Either the state attorney should do something, the police chief should do something, the FBI should do something. Somebody needs to stop this, and it can't go on where officers get away with this type of behavior all the time.
Yeah, and again, we're not talking about all the officers. We're talking about this one right here. And this one right here is the bad apple that's spoiling the whole bunch. Oh, sorry to interrupt, but you are exactly right. The Punta Gorda Police Department is a very good police department. Mm-hmm. I have no complaints with any of those other officers. Frankly, some of those officers are really, really good, and they heard all my cases, because that's how good they are, okay? So I have no complaints with the Punta Gorda Police Department. But there's one bad cop there. They know it. You know it. The people know it. The state attorney knows it. Everybody knows it. Anybody who's watched that video knows it.
Anybody in the business of the legal game knows that he is a bad cop, but nobody is doing anything about it. So the only way we could do something about it is get it pressed, put it on the internet, have people cover the story, so people will request that he be fired. This canine cop is going around Punta Gorda today, going into schools, seeing people, pulling people over. He tailgates half the people I know in town. He needs to go. And I don't know why they won't get rid of him.
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a good question. So how is Mr. Schumacher? Is that his name?
Yes, Mr. Schumacher. He's doing okay. I mean, he was a commercial fisherman. He can no longer do that because he can barely lift his arm up above his head. He's got a massive scar. His where the bite is, that side of his body is significantly shrunk compared to the other side of his body because he lost part of that muscle due to the dog. He spent 11 nights in the hospital. He had to be life-flighted to Lee Memorial. So he's getting better. He's getting better.
Because he didn't have lights on his bicycle.
And that's how the whole case started, because he didn't have a light on his bicycle. Also, if you look at the video, he didn't have shoes on, he didn't have a shirt on, he didn't have a belt on.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. This guy was not the biggest threat in the world, and this cop should have been able to handle it and left the dog in the car.
The bottom line is sometimes people use the weapons that they have because they want to, not because they need to. And that's what he did here. He wanted to use his canine. You could tell it from the first second of the first video. and he used it, and he used it improperly, and he should be fired.
And how are you and your client pursuing this case?
Well, we just filed our notice of intent to sue because when you sue the government, you have to give them 6 months notice. So we sent them a letter telling them that we're going to sue, and then we're probably going to end up in federal court. Frankly, I think my client would just be satisfied if the cop were fired, but I think that ship is sailing quite rapidly.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, listen, I'm a lawyer. I want to make money, but this is more than just about money. This is about making my client whole and getting this officer off the street. I have a family in town. Other people have families in town. This officer is a danger to the community.
I would have to agree. It's sad to say it, too.
It is. It
Very
is.
sad to say it.
I don't
but
like
I would
bashing
have to
cops at
agree.
all.
No, but when you watch that video, that's the first thing that pops into your head. It's
Well, I
like,
think-
what? Why is this guy letting this go on?
I think the most important thing about that video that people need to pay attention to is the attack command that Cole uses, the officer uses, which is pocket. And throughout that video, he gives the attack command several times, even when Schumacher was down on the ground saying, please get the dog off of me. He's saying, good pocket, good pocket. He's telling the dog to attack him more, and the dog is.
It's a frustrating situation. I mean, I'm a little fired up, I'll be honest with you, because I've had...
you know, it's getting me a little fired up, too. And the response from the police chief, Lewis, I don't know. I'm kind of surprised at the lack of response, really.
Well, I believe he just released a letter. I briefly read it on my phone. I mean, the police chief Lewis is a good guy.
Yeah.
He's a good officer. I have nothing but respect for him. He's just way on the wrong side of this. I understand that you want to protect your guys, but this is not the person to protect. He's not the one who hired this officer. The prior chief hired him. He never should have been hired in the first place with 2 prior complaints of excessive use of force and being basically fired from a different police department. So I don't know why the chief is supporting him, but that's his decision, and I'm here to fight that decision.
Okay, so you guys have already filed. You've already provided your intent to sue.
Correct.
So we're hanging another 6 months before we actually find out anything, how this progresses.
Yeah, unfortunately, these cases take a real long time to get settled.
And they'll tend to drag it out.
Well, we're hoping they don't. But if that's the case, I mean, we're ready to litigate if we have to.
Okay. Hi, caller. You're on the air.
Hi. You know, I think this guy needs to look in the mirror. You know, these guys always make the deals. So all the stuff he's talking about, the cops that don't, you know, get charged with abuse, the lawyers make a deal and say, tell their clients not to pursue the thing, whatever, and then what happens? It compounds, goes down the road, they get more seniority, more of the union stuff gets involved, more of the federal government, more rules and regulations. So, you know, you guys are the problem. You're the ones who perpetrate this stuff because you don't do your job to start with.
Well, if I could respond, my job is to my client and what's in my client's best interest, not what's into the best interest of the community. That job is for the state attorney.
You're part of the court system.
You're correct,
you have
sir.
the duty, and actually by certain statutes, the obligation to put this stuff forward to the court.
That is incorrect, sir.
Unless the rules have been changed. in the
My
last
job
100 years.
as a defense attorney is to get the best outcome for my client. If the case gets dismissed, my client is happy, and it's not appropriate for me to file a complaint because then my client will just be pulled over numerous more times. My job is to protect my client.
Now that's ridiculous. Now you're saying that there's automatic profile because your client's pulled over. If your client's pulled over more than
This is
once,
this
you know
is
you got a
small-town
harassment
America. What do you
situation.
think? This
So
is what
no,
happens.
That's just baloney. That's just ridiculous. Now
Well, I'm
now
telling
you're
you what
just being
happens.
Stupid about it.
I'm telling you what happens. Listen, if somebody should stop these officers, it should be the police department. It should be the state attorney. I'll give you a perfect example. When Deputy Ireland, the Charlotte County Sheriff's deputy, got in trouble, I knew he was bad 2 years before he got arrested. I was told he was bad by other officers. I was told by the state attorney. I used to run around yelling and screaming that he was bad, and nobody did anything about it until he got caught.